Picture this: a peaceful suburban neighborhood where families feel safe, children play in their yards, and the hum of everyday life is all anyone ever hears. It's the kind of place where nothing bad ever seems to happen. But on one seemingly ordinary night inside one of those quiet homes, the unthinkable occurred. A family of four, parents devoted to their children, and two young boys with their whole lives ahead of them, were brutally silenced. By morning, their home had become the center of a horrifying crime scene. Police were called to perform a routine welfare check after loved ones grew concerned when no one answered calls or texts. What they found inside would haunt even the most seasoned investigators. There were no broken windows, no kicked-in doors, no signs of a robbery gone wrong. Everything in the house seemed untouched, except for the devastating reality of what had happened to the family within. The parents, Zoraida and Alberto, and their sons, Adriel and Diego, were found lifeless, along with the family's dogs. Whatever had happened that night wasn't random. It was planned, it was deliberate, and most disturbingly, it was personal. Questions began swirling immediately. Who could do this? Why would someone target a family so loved, so cherished by their community? Investigators, desperate for answers, began piecing together the family's final hours. What they uncovered would send shockwaves through the community. A betrayal so deep, so calculated, that it left everyone asking how such a tragedy could even be possible. But the answers didn't come easily. As detectives peeled back the layers of this case, they found secrets no one could have expected. Relationships that seemed perfect on the surface began to reveal cracks. Cracks that grew into chasms filled with jealousy, deceit, and manipulation. The deeper they dug, the clearer it became. This wasn't the work of a stranger. This was someone close to the family, someone they trusted, someone who turned that trust into the ultimate weapon. What could drive someone to commit such an unthinkable act? Was it jealousy, anger, or something even more complex? As we unravel this chilling story, you'll hear about the lives of the Rolon Bartolomei family, their final moments, and the web of lies that led to their devastating end. Stay with us as we uncover a story that will leave you questioning just how well you really know the people you let into your life. This is not just a tale of tragedy, it's a story of betrayal, manipulation, and the ultimate destruction of trust. And by the end, the answers we find will be as haunting as the crime itself. On that quiet evening in mid-September 2023, in the peaceful town of Romaville, Illinois, an unimaginable act of violence shattered the calm. It all began when a concerned mother reached out to the local police. She hadn't heard from her daughter Zoraida Bartolomei all day. This silence was unusual for the tightly knit family. Zoraida, her husband Alberto Rolon, and their two young sons, Adriel and Diego, were always in touch. As officers arrived at the modest home on Concord Avenue, there were no immediate signs of distress from the outside. It looked like any other suburban home, neatly kept, quiet, and still. But when they entered, they found a scene that would haunt them forever. Inside the house, the bodies of Zoraida, Alberto, and their two children were discovered. All four had been shot to death, along with the family's three dogs. It was a scene of utter devastation, one that left even seasoned investigators shaken. What could drive someone to such a merciless act? The more they dug into the family's history and relationships, the clearer it became that this was no random act of violence. This was calculated, personal, and deeply rooted in betrayal and manipulation. The story would soon lead authorities to a man named Nathaniel Huey Jr., a former security guard with a troubled past. Nathaniel wasn't just an acquaintance of the family. He was intimately tied to them in ways no one could have foreseen. What began as a seemingly routine welfare check quickly spiraled into a nationwide manhunt, exposing a web of lies, deceit, and misplaced trust that culminated in the murders of an innocent family. But Nathaniel wasn't acting alone. His fiancée, Ermelinda Palomo, played a critical role in the events that led to this tragedy. Palomo, a 50-year-old woman with a talent for manipulation, had discovered Nathaniel's affair with Zoraida. Instead of confronting the betrayal head-on, Palomo devised a plan so elaborate and destructive that it would lead to the deaths of four innocent people. Using fake online personas, Palomo convinced Nathaniel that Zoraida was part of a criminal conspiracy targeting him. She fed him fabricated stories and false evidence, creating an illusion that Zoraida posed a direct threat to his life. Consumed by fear, paranoia, and misplaced anger, Nathaniel fell for the deception completely. The lies Palomo spun took root, driving Nathaniel to the brink of an unspeakable act. On the night of September 16th, 2023, Palomo drove Nathaniel to the family's home. Under the cover of darkness, Nathaniel entered the house and executed Zoraida, Alberto, and their two young sons. The brutality of the crime was staggering. Two innocent boys aged 7 and 9 were among the victims. The family's three dogs were also killed, leaving behind a silent, horrifying tableau of destruction. This wasn't just a case of a crime of passion. It was a methodical, cold-blooded act fueled by manipulation and deceit. After the murders, Nathaniel and Palomo fled the state, embarking on a cross-country run from law enforcement that would eventually end in tragedy. The following days were marked by a nationwide search. Law enforcement agencies worked tirelessly to track the pair, piecing together their movements through surveillance footage, witness reports, and digital evidence. Their flight from Illinois would take them to Catoosa, Oklahoma, where it all came to a dramatic and fatal conclusion. What motivated such a catastrophic chain of events? Was it Nathaniel's unrelenting anger over the affair, Palomo's manipulative vendetta against Zoraida, or a combination of both? As the details of this case unfolded, the full scope of the tragedy became apparent. And now we must go back to the beginning to uncover how this tragic story unfolded. Zoraida was known for her dedication and professionalism, working diligently at an engineering company in Glendale Heights. It was here that she crossed paths with Nathaniel Huey Jr., a 31-year-old security guard employed by the same firm. Their professional relationship soon evolved into a clandestine affair, hidden from their respective partners. Unbeknownst to Zoraida, Nathaniel was engaged to 50-year-old Ermelinda Palomo, a woman with a keen sense of intuition and a propensity for manipulation. The Rolon Bartolomei family was well regarded in their community. Neighbors often saw Alberto playing with Adriel and Diego in the front yard, teaching them to ride their bikes or tossing a baseball. Zoraida was active in local events, frequently volunteering at the boys' school and participating in neighborhood watch meetings. To outsiders, their life seemed idyllic, a testament to the American dream. However, beneath the surface, tensions were brewing. Alberto, a devoted husband, began to suspect that something was amiss in his marriage. He noticed Zoraida's late nights at work, the hushed phone conversations, and the occasional unexplained absences. His suspicions were not unfounded. Upon discovering the affair between Zoraida and Nathaniel, Alberto's emotions ranged from heartbreak to anger. In a moment of rage, he vandalized Nathaniel's vehicle, an act that did not go unnoticed. Meanwhile, Ermelinda Palomo had also uncovered the infidelity. But rather than confront Nathaniel directly, she devised a more insidious plan. Utilizing her cunning, Ermelinda created multiple online personas, masquerading as members of a fictitious criminal organization. Through these fabricated identities, she convinced Nathaniel that Zoraida was a mole, targeting him for reasons unknown. The psychological manipulation was meticulous, preying on Nathaniel's insecurities and fears. As days turned into weeks, the weight of the deception bore heavily on Nathaniel. Believing his life to be in imminent danger, he felt compelled to take drastic action. Ermelinda, maintaining her facade, orchestrated the plan's every detail, ensuring that Nathaniel remained none the wiser to her true intentions. On the evening of September 16th, 2023, the Rolon Bartolomei household was winding down from a typical day. The boys had finished their homework and were preparing for bed. Alberto was in the living room, watching television, while Zoraida tidied up the kitchen. It was supposed to be an ordinary evening until everything changed. Under the cover of darkness, Ermelinda drove Nathaniel to the vicinity of the family's home. Equipped with a firearm and fueled by a concoction of fear and misplaced vengeance, Nathaniel approached the residence. The details of what transpired next are harrowing. Nathaniel entered the home and, in a calculated manner, shot and killed Zoraida, Alberto, Adriel, and Diego. The family's three dogs were also found dead, each having suffered fatal gunshot wounds. The crime scene was a tableau of devastation. Initial observations by law enforcement noted the precision of the killings, suggesting a premeditated act rather than a crime of passion. There were no signs of forced entry, indicating that Nathaniel may have been familiar with the home's layout or had been granted access. Personal belongings were left undisturbed, ruling out robbery as a motive. Neighbors, when interviewed, recalled hearing raised voices earlier that day. But no one thought it would end like this. The community was left in shock, grappling with the reality that such a heinous act could occur in their midst. As investigators delved deeper into the relationships and events leading up to the murders, the intricate web of deceit and manipulation began to unravel, painting a chilling picture of betrayal and orchestrated violence. When officers entered Zoraida's residence, they were confronted with a scene of unimaginable violence. As detectives meticulously combed through the crime scene, they collected several pieces of critical evidence. Among the findings were 9mm shell casings, indicating the type of firearm used in the killings. Additionally, forensic analysis revealed the presence of unidentified fingerprints and traces of DNA, which were promptly sent to the lab for further examination. Interviews with neighbors painted a picture of a seemingly normal family. One neighbor mentioned seeing a dark-colored SUV parked near the residence in the early morning hours, a detail that would later prove significant. The investigation took a pivotal turn when detectives uncovered a complex web of relationships involving the victims. It was revealed that Zoraida Bartolomei had been involved in an extramarital affair with Nathaniel Huey Jr., a 32-year-old security guard. Huey's fiancée, 50-year-old Ermelinda Palomo, had discovered the affair and, driven by jealousy and a desire for revenge, orchestrated an elaborate scheme to manipulate Huey into believing that Zoraida posed a threat to him. Palomo created fictitious online personas, convincing Huey that he was under surveillance by a criminal organization and that Zoraida was a mole planning to attack him. Believing these deceptions, Huey felt compelled to eliminate the perceived threat. After the crime, the pair fled the state, leading authorities on a multi-state manhunt. The investigation reached its climax when law enforcement tracked Huey and Palomo to Catoosa, Oklahoma. A high-speed chase ensued, ending in a crash. Officers approaching the vehicle heard gunshots. Inside, they found Huey dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound, while Palomo was critically injured and later succumbed to her injuries. This case stands as a chilling reminder of how deception and manipulation can lead to devastating consequences, leaving a community to grapple with the loss and search for answers in the aftermath of such a tragedy. As the investigation closed in on Nathaniel Huey Jr. and Ermelinda Palomo, the final chapter of this tragedy unfolded with as much chaos as its beginning. In the wreckage of the vehicle, Huey was found with a fatal self-inflicted gunshot wound. Palomo, critically injured, was rushed to the hospital but later succumbed to her injuries. With both suspects deceased, there would be no trial, no testimony, and no direct accountability in a court of law. The abrupt ending left the surviving family members and the community without the closure a legal process might have provided. For the families of Zoraida Bartolomei and Alberto Rolon, the loss was immeasurable. 4 innocent lives, 2 parents and 2 young children, were wiped out in an act of calculated violence. The surviving relatives were left grappling not only with the grief of their loss, but also with the unanswered questions that lingered. Could anything have been done to prevent this? What truly motivated such an act of destruction? In Romaville, the community came together to mourn and honor the victims. Vigils were held, and flowers and messages of love lined the sidewalk outside the family's home. People who had never met the Rolon Bartolomei family were moved by their story, by the senselessness of the violence, and by the fragility of life itself. But even as investigators pieced together the chain of events, some lingering questions refused to fade. Could Nathaniel Huey Jr. have acted differently if not for the elaborate manipulation by Ermelinda Palomo? How much of his rage and paranoia were fueled by her carefully crafted lies? And could someone have intervened before the tragedy unfolded? For some, the actions of Palomo were as monstrous as those of Huey. Her jealousy, her desire for control, and her willingness to exploit another's vulnerabilities created the perfect storm. But was she the sole architect of this tragedy, or did Huey's own emotions and choices seal the fate of the Rolon Bartolomei family? In the absence of a trial, these questions remain speculative. What is certain, however, is the devastating impact of their actions. 4 lives ended far too soon, and the ripples of that loss continue to affect all who knew them. Chief Brant Hromadka perhaps summed it up best when he said, "Nothing can prepare a person for such an incident, and nothing can justify such an act of violence." And as we close this chapter, we are left with a haunting reality. Even with the details laid bare, the motives behind this horrifying act remain hard to comprehend. Could someone have seen the signs earlier? Could intervention have prevented the tragedy? These are questions for all of us to consider, as the lessons of this case remind us of the importance of vigilance, empathy, and understanding the warning signs of manipulation and violence. This case is more than just a story about a crime. It's a story about trust shattered, relationships manipulated, and lives cut tragically short. Zoraida Bartolomei, her husband Alberto Rolon, and their 2 young sons, Adriel and Diego, were a family that embodied love and togetherness. Their future was bright, their bond strong, but in one horrifying night, all of that was taken away. We've traced the events that led to this unimaginable tragedy. From Nathaniel Huey Jr.'s manipulation by Ermelinda Palomo to the devastating consequences of misplaced trust and unchecked emotions. Every detail has brought us closer to understanding how this could happen. But even with the facts laid bare, it's hard to grasp the full scope of the loss. The Rolon Bartolomei family didn't just lose their lives. They lost the countless moments they had yet to experience. Birthdays, family dinners, bedtime stories, and everything in between, all stolen in an act of calculated violence. And for their loved ones left behind, the grief is immeasurable. The community's response to this tragedy was one of shock, mourning, and reflection. Yet as they tried to make sense of what happened, they were left grappling with questions that may never be fully answered. What drives a person to commit such a crime? Was Nathaniel Huey Jr. entirely under Ermelinda Palomo's control? Or did he make his own choices in the end? Could someone have seen the warning signs earlier and stepped in to prevent this tragedy? These are the questions that remain, even as we close the chapter on this case. But this story doesn't end here. It's part of a larger conversation about the complexities of human behavior, the consequences of unchecked emotions, and the devastating impact of manipulation. The Rolon Bartolomei family deserves so much more. They were a family filled with love, a family with a future, and their loss is a tragedy that words cannot fully capture. We've seen how manipulation, unchecked emotions, and fractured relationships culminated in an act of violence that shook an entire community. The scars of this event will remain with the survivors, the neighbors, and everyone touched by this story. If this story gripped you, if it left you with questions about human behavior, betrayal, and the thin line between love and destruction, you'll want to check out our other videos in this channel. You'll find crime cases that peels back the layers of human nature, revealing how fragile and dangerous our relationships can be. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to this channel. We release multiple true crime stories every week, each one more chilling, more thought-provoking, and more intense than the last. And you'll want to be here for the next one. It's darker, more twisted, and will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about humanity. Turn on your notifications so you don't miss a single upload. Trust me, the next story will make this one seem almost mild in comparison. Thank you for watching and being part of this journey to uncover the truth behind these chilling stories. Your support helps ensure that the voices of the victims are never forgotten. By subscribing, liking, and sharing this video, you're making sure that happens. And as you reflect on this story, remember to stay vigilant in your relationships, question the motives of those around you, and never take trust lightly. Stay safe, and don't forget to subscribe to keep these stories alive and the victims remembered. And always remember, sometimes the people we trust the most are the ones we should fear the most. I'll see you in the next video.